Hey everybody, welcome back. So we're on part 5 of our 8-part series on Claire Weeks and her trajectory of nervous suffering. If you haven't watched the first 4, you probably should do that just because they kind of build off of each other, and I'm going to be talking about things that I'm assuming you've heard before. And so before I launch into the 5th kind of phase of this trajectory, let's rehash, as we always do, our 3 things. One is that Claire Weeks talks about sensitization, bewilderment, and fear as 3 aspects that kind of keep us stuck in an anxious process. And again, she wasn't writing about benzo people, but I think it's very applicable. Sensitization, we certainly have that. That is, our central nervous system is sensitized, and because of that, we are like tin cans, and everything reverberates, and hormones, and stress, and day-to-day stuff, and medications and supplements and food, and we're sensitive to lots of things. And so we have a highly sensitized system. The way we process emotions, the way we think our thoughts, everything is funneled through this very sensitized system and can be really challenging. She also talks about bewilderment, that I can experience. I can attest to this right now. I've been at this for a couple of years now. I should know the drill. But as I entered a wave a couple weeks ago, bewilderment comes back in, and I think, oh my God, what if this is something different? What if I'm unique? What if I'm worse than everyone else? What if this wave doesn't pass? What if, right? And all of those questions keep us kind of locked in that state. And then the third thing she talks about is our fear of the state that we are in, which is, I think, true for many of us as well. And she calls that second fear, that second layer of fear of, we can't help that our limbic system is misfiring, right? And that we're all of the teddy bears in our lives have turned into grizzly bears. We can't do much about that, but we can choose how we respond to those grizzly bears. And if we buy into the fact that they're grizzly bears, we're going to get stuck. If we have the attitude of, I know you look like a grizzly bear, but actually you're a teddy bear, being seen through the distorted lens of my sensitized system to make you look like a grizzly bear, right? So I was talking to somebody today, and we were talking about, we just have a whole lot of scared in this, a lot of fear, right? A lot of free-floating fear and terror and dis-ease. And again, our brain doesn't like that, and so we start attaching meaning, and our fear tries to find a home. And it can find a home in the shower, the car, the supermarket, being alone, being with other people, all kinds of things. We can attach our fear to all sorts of things. So that's the first 3 things I wanted to talk about, were sensitization, bewilderment, and fear. And then again, the 3 things I talk about that's true for any human being going through anxiety, which is a fear of being a feeling out of control, of things being uncertain, and vulnerability, which again we have in spades. So no doubt, no reason to doubt why we would be feeling so anxious in this process. So we're on part 5 today. The first part was, again, indecision, that led then to the second part, which was suggestibility, that led to the third part, which was loss of confidence. And then yesterday we talked about the 4th part, which was feelings of personality disintegration. And we talked about what I mean by that is, that sense of we're just not ourselves, right? And that we kind of feel fragmented and a shell of ourselves, or whatever language we use. And again, this is not a permanent state, okay? But it is a feeling of fragmentation, of not being ourselves, being in a million pieces, that type of thing. So the 5th part today we're going to talk about is our feelings of unreality, okay? Now, we use the terms depersonalization and derealization. You'll hear them oftentimes on the sites and in the forums, and that's really kind of the common terminology for feelings of unreality. Depersonalization is kind of the sense of I'm not real, I don't feel real, my hands don't feel real, I feel like an alien in this world, I feel like a robot, I can hear myself talking, it doesn't even sound like my voice, those types of things. It can be very scary. And derealization is the world isn't real. The world looks distorted. Colors look distorted. Things that were once familiar look distorted. And so this is what Claire Weeks talked about as this 5th phase of her trajectory, were these feelings of unreality. And again, keep in mind, she was not talking about us. She wasn't talking about the medication injured. She was talking about people that had spent a great deal of time moving through those first four things we talked about, feeling anxious and feeling insecure and feeling indecisive and getting suggestible and losing confidence in themselves, and then starting to feel themselves pull away from themselves. And then as they do that, what we tend to do is we get more and more scared because we're more and more bewildered about what the hell's happening, and are we ever going to be okay, and who else has this, and am I as bad as everyone else? Am I the worst case scenario, right? And as we spend so much time in this anxious introspection, we begin to not invest as much time in the outside world. So depersonalization and derealization is actually a couple things, I think. I think we all know it to be kind of it has kind of a protective capacity. It's kind of like what the brain kicks into gear to help you manage being overwhelmed. I was just reading a book by a friend of mine. It's called Bone by Bone. It's by a Geraldine Ritter, and I knew her as Geraldine Smitherman, and she survived the Amtrak crash that happened outside of Philadelphia a couple of years back. And she was talking about being in the hospital, and obviously something very different than what we're going through. She didn't, thank God, have a traumatic brain injury. She basically had every other type of injury you could imagine. But she talked about the pain being so great that she would dissociate, and she could kind of watch them dressing her wounds from above, or just check out and numb out. And in many ways, dissociation that comes in the form of derealization or depersonalization can be adaptive in the sense that it protects us, but it's a really strange feeling. And for those of us that are going through medication discontinuation and benzo withdrawal and bind, these feelings can be fleeting. They can kind of come and go, and we get kind of our bell rung, or we're having a bad day, or they can be a little bit more permanent, and kind of be lingering symptoms that last quite a long time. And because it's not a really natural state to be in, it can be really terrifying to feel like you're not in touch with yourself and you're not in touch with the world. They often go hand in hand, but they don't have to occur together. You can have depersonalization without derealization. You can have derealization without depersonalization. Me personally, I've actually kind of feel both of them. They kind of swirl around each other. But again, Claire Weeks was talking about that this was a natural evolution in the worsening kind of an anxious system. And again, she saw it really also as a byproduct of being so kind of anxiously introspective, right? And this is something we've talked about many times, where, when I've talked about this before, like if you're out in the ocean and you're keeping your head above water because you're stuck in a riptide and you're being pulled out to sea, you're not simultaneously looking at the shore and thinking, oh, look, they seem to be having chocolate ice cream. No, I think it's strawberry ice cream. I hope they're enjoying that ice cream. No, we're not having those kinds of thoughts. We're thinking, holy shit, what the hell's am I going to be able to survive this riptide? How far is this going to take me out? Am I going to go under? Is somebody going to save me? And so that's, I've also likened it to having like a picnic in a hurricane, right? And so it's not that we're being selfish or self-absorbed because we're narcissistic or that there's something wrong with us. When people are in pain, the worst kind of pain is your own, okay? And it is not uncommon when people are in extreme mental or physical duress that they become preoccupied with that. The problem with that is that preoccupation can lead to our worlds becoming even smaller than they already have. And we're looking inward versus looking out. And I saw a great post on Facebook. I'll see if I can find it, but it was talking about, like you're the person on stage, right? And you're talking to the audience. You're not peering back behind the curtain to make sure all the props and all the people and the lighting people are doing all their stuff, right? You're facing outward into the world, engaging your world and audience. But what happens to us in benzo withdrawal, because we're so preoccupied, because we're in such distress, is we're actually on that stage, but we're peering back behind the curtain. And the world's kind of happening behind us while we're peering back behind that curtain, trying to figure it all out, trying to figure out, who's doing the lighting, who's doing the sound, is the next act ready to go? Like we're trying to, we're focused in the wrong direction. And so the world, when we do look at it, can feel really overwhelming and distorted when we spent so much time kind of focusing inward. And again, I'm not saying this as a criticism. I do the same thing as well. I just know that, trying to build some awareness around, I'm doing that thing again. I'm so, I don't know if this happens to you guys, but on a bad day, I can kind of get stuck in my room and the walls can feel like they're closing in, and I can almost feel like a magnetic pull of like, I can't leave the room. I can't get up to go do something. It feels like a fearful magnetic pull, and that world will close in on me. And inevitably, if I can get out to the backyard, even at night, and look at the moon or go for a little walk, it doesn't mean that the discomfort goes away, but suddenly something shifts a little bit. It's like a little bit of the world comes into view, and I don't feel so detached. I don't feel quite so odd. When I first walk outside, after being in my room or in that state, everything feels really bright or weird or strange. It's overwhelming my senses. So feelings of unreality is a very common piece of this, and it's the fifth part of the trajectory that Claire Weeks speaks about. And again, she saw this in folks that we're not going through what we're going through. So there's a good reason why we're sensitized. We might have been sensitized prior to getting on benzos. That might have been why we were put on benzos, is because of a sensitization of our nervous system. But we certainly become sensitized coming off them. So we'll just review again. Indecision to suggestibility, to loss of confidence, to feelings of personality disintegration, to feelings of unreality, and depersonalization to realization. And we'll pick up tomorrow on our sixth part. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Take care.